welcome to the April 18th meeting of the West Sacramento Planning Commission. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance by my colleague, Commissioner Berliner.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter along with request to speak cards. A reminder to everyone that request to speak cards should be completed and turned into the clerk prior to the completion of any staff presentation. For those speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please write the item number on your card. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. With that, we're going to go to General Administration Functions, Part 1. Item A, presentation by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the Commission. I don't have any card to speak, so there is no public comment this time. All right, move on to item B, correspondence and staff communications from the Planning Commission Secretary. Mr. Tilley.
Yes, thank you, Chair Castillo. 2 items for you tonight. First of all, you should have a memo at your desk from Justin Hardy regarding item number 3. Earlier this week, we did receive a letter from a resident regarding that project, so we'll address that one at that time. And then at the conclusion of our meeting, when we get to informal discussion, I would like to have a moment to talk about just our upcoming meeting schedule. So with that, it closes our communications at this time.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to item C, disclosure of ex parte communications. Planning Commission should disclose any communications they have had on the agenda. On the agenda items at this time, we'll start on my left. Commissioner Sternfels.
I did speak with a resident about item number 3.
Commissioner Sablon.
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Berliner.
Nothing to disclose.
Thank you. Commissioner Vu.
Yes, I did have a brief discussion with a resident on item number 3 as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonard.
No communications.
Commissioner Vice Chair Liebig.
None to report.
Thanks, and I have none to report either. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Consideration and approval of the minutes from April 4th, 2019 Commission meeting. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Vice Chair Liebig, second by Commissioner Sternfels. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Item 2 on the regular agenda, public hearing regarding design review and approval of Resolution 19-4PC recommending the City Council approve proposed 3rd Street frontage for CalSTRS Phase 2. Mr. Laffey.
Yeah, before Seamus gets going on this one, I would like to let the commission know that Lisa Blatnick, the Chief of Administrative Services for CalSTRS, is here tonight on this item. And so with that, I'd like to have Seamus take it away.
Good evening, Chair Castillo and members of the Planning Commission. The city received a design review application for CalSTRS' 2nd phase office tower earlier this year. The second tower would be located adjacent to the existing tower on the where the surface parking lot is currently located. So before I get into the design of the building, I'm going to first give an overview of the history of the site and the previous approvals. So the original tower and the second tower were originally approved by the City Council in February of 2006. At that time, the city and the property owner of the Raley's Landing River 3 site, which is the site that CalSTRS is located on, entered into a development agreement giving CalSTRS the vested right to build the first tower and the second tower. Per that development agreement, the second phase requires design review approval from City Council with the Planning Commission's recommendation. And the reason for that recommendation is really to make sure that that Third Street pedestrian realm is active. There's a ground floor commercial uses, and it's an inviting place for pedestrians. The development agreement limits the design review to that Third Street frontage if the city manager determines the design for Phase 2 complies with the project description in the development agreement and is consistent with the design and materials of the Phase 1 tower. The city manager made this determination last September, that the second tower is substantially compliant with the project description in the EIR and the Raley's Landing River 3 development agreement, and it is compliant with the design and materials of that first phase. So as such, for tonight, for Planning Commission tonight for your review, is the Third Street frontage. Go back. Yeah, so for the regulating documents, the first, you have the development agreement, and you have the Raley's Landing River 3 EIR. And then if anything is not addressed in that, it's also within Plan Development Overlay 30. Plan Development Overlay 30 encompasses the Raley's Landing area. That was approved before the city incorporated. And then after that, the Washington Specific Plan, 1996 was approved, and this area is covered by the Washington Specific Plan, so if there's nothing, if it's not addressed in the development agreement or the EIR or Plan Development 30, then we would look to a Washington Specific Plan for guidance. So here is the ground floor uses. As you can see, at the northwest corner, there's a cafe. Then moving south along 3rd Street, there's the childcare. And then if you go around the corner along Waterfront Place, there is the main lobby. And internal to that is meeting spaces. There is an entrance along 3rd Street to the cafe and to the internal meeting spaces and the childcare. And there's also an entrance to the cafe off of E Street. So these are the primary materials along 3rd Street. There's a stainless steel base, there's a wood canopy that would be over the sidewalk providing shading to the pedestrians. There's also a glass canopy at the entrance. So the ground floor is commercial, retail, we got the cafe, you have the childcare, but above that is structured parking. So screening the structured parking is the formed metal panel. And then you also have board-formed concrete along the ground level. And then also there's a lot of transparent glass. So here's the elevation showing where those materials are located. This is if you were across the street where the Victorian homes are and you're looking towards the project site. So on the left side of that, you can see the cafe, and then you have the glass, and then you have the childcare on the right side of that elevation. So here's the southwest corner view. This is looking if you were at the Waterfront Place and 3rd Street. This would be the corner that has the lobby and then also the childcare. And this is looking south. This would be the cafe. So the cafe has outdoor seating, you can sit along the sidewalk there, and then also in between the landscape planters there'd be seating. So this gives a better representation of that, the outdoor seating. You can see the wood canopy providing shading, the blade siding for pedestrians. So this next slide here shows the kind of the cross section where you have the height 50 feet. So in the original EIR, in the project description, it references a 36-foot height along 3rd Street. The applicant is proposing to have that actually be 50 feet for some additional structured parking. The applicant will go into more detail of why this is needed, but what it does is it maximizes the efficiency of the parking and also provides more energy efficiency for the building. There are additional parking spaces available to the public with this increase in height along 3rd Street. The development agreement for Raley's Landing River 3 requires 25 public parking spaces, and with this proposal, there will be 66 public parking spaces. So I'll end with this last slide here, looking down 3rd Street. This is really what we're discussing tonight, 3rd Street frontage, making sure it's pedestrian friendly, the materials, the colors. We are recommending that the commission recommend approval of this design to the city council. Any comments we receive tonight, we will relay to the city council when we go there later this spring. Thank you. And the applicant does have a presentation.
Thank you. Go ahead and hear from the applicant, or would commissioners like to entertain any questions to staff at the moment? All right, we'll have the applicant come up. If you can please introduce yourself.
Chair Castillo and Commissioners, my name is Michelle Azevedo. I'm with Ridge Capital, formerly the applicant for this project, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight. I would like to take this opportunity to, again, introduce Lisa Blatnick. She's the Chief Administrative Officer, Chief of Administrative Services for CalSTRS. She's in the audience. Kathy Berg, she's the partner in charge, and Franco Rossetti, designer with ZGF Architects, are going to be giving the real presentation here. We also have some various other designers in the audience. So we have just a short presentation. Kathy's going to walk us through how we went from phase one to where we are today, and specifically on the 3rd Street, and then we're going to talk about all the fun stuff up here, if you don't mind, and then we'll answer any questions along the way. If you want to interrupt, just interrupt. How about that? Come on up. I'm really not that important, so I'm just going to.
She's very important. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this project today. We're really excited about what this building can do for West Sacramento, and excited to share with you how we got to where we are today. So this is a view from the river looking at West Sacramento and the existing tower. And when we first started meeting with CalSTRS, one of the things that we talked about with them was how we could create a campus here for CalSTRS and create a second building that was very complementary to the development of the area. So the next slide, you will see the bar in the back, that's the additional building that we're building, the tower, is a little bit lower than what you might have seen in the original reviewed documents for this particular site. One of the advantages of stretching this building out lower was to first begin to step the massing of this site down towards the neighborhood development that is planned for in the future along 3rd Street. In addition, it gave CalSTRS larger floor plates, which helps us achieve some of the sustainability goals that we have for the project, and a much larger roof structure, which allows us to generate more energy with photovoltaic panels, and also gives CalSTRS large, generous floor plates that provide good connectivity for their employees. So as Seamus mentioned, we are focusing on the ground level active use spaces along 3rd Street. So the cafe, the childcare, and the exterior childcare play area would front 3rd. There is an additional loading dock that is added along East Street. This was really the only viable location for that additional loading, as we wanted to keep it off 3rd Street and off Waterfront Avenue. So we've done our best to work with the design to make sure that we minimize that exposure and still create a viable streetscape on that side. On the south side, we have the lobby, and here you can see those entrances. And shaded in gray here, you see those 66 public spaces that would be accessible. So just a quick walk of how we got to where we are. This is again that view from the corner of Waterfront and 3rd. And you can see the phase one tower in the background. You can see the 5 stories of new office space that we're building that are part of phase 2, over 5 levels of parking, and the ground floor active use spaces. One of the things we wanted to make sure we did was connect to the phase 1 building and be very complementary in the materials and the datums that we brought across. So you will see we're continuing the level of ceramic tile that marks the parking garage across into the new building. This is the one deviation that we're requesting, which is to be able to align that garage and get a full 5th floor of parking, which allows those additional parking spaces. In terms of bringing the scale down, there's a few moves that we made to begin to take this building from a long mass and break it into a series of building forms. These cuts in the facade both help bring daylight into the building and also begin to bring that scale down, and we're doing that both at the office levels as well as the garage level, and then really paying attention to how we activate and provide transparency at the ground level. The next level of bringing that scale down is to really think about how the building is articulated. You'll see on the upper building that we're paying very careful attention to the breakup between window and wall area. And on the lower level where the garage screen is, we're starting to introduce a level of detail and articulation in how we play with these panels I'll describe here in a minute to provide some visual interest as you're moving past the building on 3rd. And finally, down to materiality, the materials that we're going to share with you today, we really are working to create a fine texture and a pedestrian-scaled expression of materials at the ground level. So laminated patterned glass at the corner that is very finely detailed, board-form concrete, which is created by and reflects the texture and grain of the wood that is used for forming those walls. And then these are examples of not the color, but the scale. This is a full-scale example of the shape of the metal panels that would clad the garage. So dropping down into 3rd Street, really focusing on the pedestrian environment, we're going to swing into the corner here. So next image. This is that childcare play area on the corner. And we are looking to balance both the privacy and the security for the kids, but also to really celebrate the activity and the noise and the excitement that you'll hear when the kids are outside playing. So there is a planting strip at the front with a wall that would prevent people from being able to go directly into that childcare area, topped by a translucent glazing, which is here, that will have a natural pattern on it, so you won't necessarily be able to look directly in at the kids, but you would get the sense that there's life and activity going on inside.
We'll pass these around too, if you want.
As we swing around looking directly at the 3rd Street elevation, the lowest level is a very transparent facade. Again, trying to make sure that we keep eyes on the street, that we hit the goals of activating the streetscape. And as you look above that, we can see the garage panels, which are alternating in direction. So by changing that direction, we begin to pick up differing light throughout the day and start to add another level of articulation. One of the other things that we're really focusing on with this garage is to make sure that it's naturally ventilated to help us achieve our sustainability goals. We don't want to have to mechanically ventilate the garage. So the spacing between the panels that you see here is designed to allow us to have free flow of air between there, but the angling of the panels is to help occlude light so that you don't see the headlights of cars from the street side. Again, Seamus pointed out what we're trying to accomplish here at the ground level with that canopy is to really bring the scale down and provide protection, both shade and rain protection for pedestrians. Also looking to activate the streetscape with furnishings where the cafe can kind of spill out onto the sidewalk. We do have a very generous sidewalk. It's about 18 feet wide total from the curb to the building face, 12 feet of through sidewalk area, and 6 feet of a furnishing zone. So we can have nice-sized tables in that furnishing zone and still have a very generous passage for pedestrians. In addition, blade signs and signage on that street will help identify the cafe entrance. These are interior photos of the cafe. The Kousters Cafes, the existing cafe is incredibly active. It's very actively used, so we anticipate that this is really going to provide a lot of visibility on the street, and also being open to the public will be a big draw for the neighborhood. And as we swing again down towards the north end of the site, you can see we are planting trees along the length of 3rd Street and following the standards and the trees that have been planted elsewhere along 3rd to continue that aesthetic. And next click. The final piece, as we move to that cafe end of the building, we have taken the advantage of opening up a double level space so that as you approach this building off coming from the opposite side of the river and coming south on 3rd, you really get a good, strong expression of activity and light and movement. So that is a double height space looking into the primary seating area of the cafe. So these are the materials, and we'll just kind of quickly walk you through these here. We encourage you, if you want to come up and ask questions or take a look at them, that would be great. The first glass we're going to show you is the glass that we've selected for the upper portion of the tower, which is most similar to the glass. It is the same, as close as we can get, and meet the energy performance of the glass that is on Tower 1. So it does have a blue tint, and that is this one. The second glazing that we will show would be used on the west facade and the ground level. It is slightly more transparent. You'll see a little less of the blue tone in this one. And again, this is really trying to make sure that we emphasize that transparency and clarity at the ground level. There are two different metal panels that we're using, one for the office tower and a different one for the parking garage. On the office tower, we're working with a panel that contains several different layers of finish and paint on it, and helps, which allows us to capture different light conditions throughout the day, and also create another level of texture and variation in the panel itself. So these are samples of what that would look like on the upper 5 office stories. On the parking garage, we're really looking here to find something that complements the ceramic tile that's on phase 1. As I mentioned, we are looking at a more open concept, so we can do that natural ventilation. And so the ceramic tile didn't work as well for us and was difficult to match. So the metal panel that we're exploring right now is designed to capture light and really complement and match as closely as possible as we can to that tile, but recognizing that we are treating this in a slightly different way. And then the final sample that we'll pass around is the example of the childcare exterior play yard glazing, which you'll be able to see has that pattern on it that would help occlude the direct view through, but it still provides some level of transparency.
What was this one for again?
So that is the parking garage. So that is for levels 2 through 5. What you're seeing, the predominant view that you're seeing in the rendering on this screen.
Okay, and just for clarification, those panels there are the size of, that's not what these are?
So the panel in this hand,
Okay.
that is the existing ceramic tile on phase 1.
Gotcha.
The opposite one is what we've selected to use in that same zone on our building in front of the parking garage. And these are the scale and the size of those metal panels they would clip to the facade. That
Okay.
one.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Excuse me, and then what was this for?
That,
They don't match it.
What's it made of?
which one?
This one.
That is, it's a, actually, you want to?
Sure, it's an aluminum panel with a specialty paint with multiple layers that give you that effect of striation. And those are just the latest iterations. We're fine tuning the right scale and pattern. So it gives the facade some breakdown and scale and interest.
So with that, that's the presentation that we had to share, and wanted to open it up to any other questions.
Great, thank you for that presentation. I'll go ahead and start on my left and my right and see if our commissioners have questions. Commissioner, want to start with Commissioner Vu?
No questions.
All right, Commissioner Leonard?
Just a question on the operations of the cafe and the outdoor seating along 3rd Street. I see that there's only one indicated entrance kind of near the front, but then I'm just trying to picture in my mind the flow of traffic, well, for lack of a better term, when people have their coffee or their lunch or whatever, and they're taking it out to a table on the street, or sorry, on the sidewalk. And then you also have, in some of these renderings, you have tables kind of in the planter strip, and then tables along the building, and then I would presume that pedestrian traffic would be walking in between them. So can you just walk us through those operations and sort of talk about the dimensions and how that works and how the flow of traffic in and out of the cafe work in that corner?
Sure, absolutely. So the entrance, the predominant entrance to the cafe is on 3rd, as you mentioned.
Yep.
And you would move in and hit the beginning of the servery line in the cafe, where you would begin to place your order. Once you've moved through and picked up your food, you could either exit back through that door and access the seating directly outside. There is also a second exit door that exits to the north. And that you'll see in the drawings that there is a ramp that then would bring you back down towards the seating that is predominantly on Third. So 2 different paths to get to that seating. The preferred location for the seating is in that furnishing zone because we have 6 feet, we have a little bit more room there, and that would be where the larger tables would be. We have been showing the opportunity to do small 2-seater tables against the window as well, because with a 12-foot sidewalk, that still leaves a good 8 feet of clear passage through, which for the, today would be very suitable for the traffic that we see on Third.
Can you,
So if we could hop to the image that shows the view down Third, I believe it's about slide 15.
yes.
That was a lucky guess.
There we go. Okay.
So you'll see just behind the tree, you can see some tables between the tree wells. So there would be a tree well, then a hardscape area that would provide room for tables, and then another tree well. The tables up against the glass would be more 2-seaters and designed to not impede the through width of the street, of the sidewalk.
Okay. So I don't know what exactly the scope is for the discussion for me. Just thinking of people leaving their trays out there and wind blowing around if they're not busing immediately. How comfortable it is if there is a high pedestrian count walking through there and people are eating. You take the example of Burgers and Brew that actually has railing around the tables, kind of separating people versus having them walking through in between. I don't know if that's really the scope of the planning commission, but just as someone who will be there, most likely, quite often, I just want to make sure that we're thinking through how the space is used by multiple uses without any physical barriers in between when you have lots of people walking back and forth and coming in and out of that front entrance door. Securing the space, securing the tables, and busing service, things like that, or just areas that maybe we talk about with the operator at some point, but just to keep in mind.
Great notes, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Liebig.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It's very thorough. There's a lot of photos which are actually great. The questions I have to do with massing, basically. So there's an additional level of parking included in the plan. The purpose behind that, I wasn't clear. Is it because you've calculated a need for additional parking, or is it for aesthetics reasons?
We do need the additional parking, and there is an efficiency in pulling the existing parking decks directly across, so we can use the ramps inside the existing space. If we were to set back that top level, we would lose about 100 spaces, and it would put us below the counts that we're trying to achieve to hit good parking ratios for this particular building.
Okay, and that results in an increase of about 14 feet, which is one of the decisions that we have to make as a planning commissioner, the planning commission tonight is to approve that. I also noted the number of public spaces available it's greater than what's required. What's your rationale behind that one?
It was possible, and given that we needed to increase that upper level, we felt that it was a good trade-off, that the city would be able to get a little bit more parking, but this project would also be able to achieve the parking it needed.
Okay. And then on the massing part, so we're going up a level from the prior determination EIR. I'm concerned that the material is shiny, a little bit too shiny, and I know that's I don't know, it looks really awesome. You've got aluminum, it's painted, and then you've got it's the metal tile that's similar to the ceramic tile. I'm concerned about the reflectiveness of that and the houses across the street, and basically it will be in the evening having a very glowing object then to the east of them. So I have one concern with that, and it's just the overall reflectiveness of the material. So I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is it okay if I just respond quickly to that? We do agree with you, and we're very careful that we don't get a lot of reflection, which is one of the reasons that we've chosen a panel that has more of a matte finish on it. And so we have been doing analysis to make sure that we wouldn't get bright reflections from it, but we do want to get a little bit of that light disruption that helps us capture the light in different ways through the day. So, appreciate the comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Sternfeld.
Thank you, first, Seamus, for the presentation. Excellent job describing the history of the project. I appreciate the historical components and kind of helping us understand how we got to today. I did want to further the discussion on parking just a little bit. So the 66 public spaces that are included, are those spaces that are inside the garage, or are they a separately accessed facility?
Hi.
Hi,
They are
Michelle.
within the garage.
Okay.
So there will be a parking plan in place once the garage, once the project is completed. So when you're coming up E Street, you will have signage, public parking. After hours, the reason why we were able to create 66 spots is because there's natural divisions within the garage that can secure the rest of the garage, but leave these spaces open during, the same hours that are available now. I think it's from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. until midnight or 1 a.m., whatever it is in the morning. And we could do it, so it made sense to do it.
So the publicly available parking spaces will only be available for after-hours use, or they'll be available anytime the garage is open?
It would be available per the agreement, which is after hours, after business hours, and on the weekends.
Okay, so I say this working at the building next door that has a terrible-looking garage that covers the rest of Third Street and isn't very good about the parking agreements because of the owners of the building. We've been pushing in this commission for a long time to try to open up additional parking opportunities, particularly when we have existing facilities and those facilities are underutilized during 2/3 of the day. I would really just encourage, I'm not going to hold anything up, but I'd really encourage additional discussions and thoughtfulness around how we can open up parking opportunities and maximize the efficiency of existing parking infrastructure we have along Third Street as we continue to redevelop this area and add more mixed uses and add more residential units. I mean, it's all coming to a head, and we have 2 parking garages there that are completely inaccessible by the public as places to park their vehicles at night, weekends, or even during the day when they're not fully utilized. Because I can tell you right now, both of those lots, I'm speaking from the one I'm a part of too, are not fully utilized all the time.
Your comment is completely appreciated and recognized and acknowledged, and I cannot speak for CalSTRS on whether or not, but they would open the garage up in the future to public parking, but there have been discussions, and I would say anything is possible, but I could not promise you that right now.
No, appreciate that, and I understand the complexities of it, and just appreciate the willingness to keep considering it and talking about it. I think it's going to be, we got to be efficient with how we're using our space, and if there's revenue opportunity for CalSTRS, and at the same time a benefit to the residents of the city, I think that's a win-win.
I think it would be important to note, too, that within the Phase 1 garage, the parking ratio now is about 3.2 per thousand, but once the garage is expanded, the parking ratio for the building, just the office tower areas, and that's not even including any of the childcare or, retail, it does drop to about 2 per 6 point thousand, which is a pretty urban standard, but I don't think there's going to be, I think the hesitation on CalSTRS' part by not agreeing to open it up for public parking is that the garage is going to be pretty impacted during the day with all the employees once the buildings are full. So we are adding garage, but it's not at the same ratio as what was developed in Phase 1.
That's fair. I appreciate that. Wanted to switch to discuss the retail for a little bit. So we talked quite a bit about the cafe on one corner. We talked a little bit about the childcare space on the other corner, but there's a lot of space in between those two. Is that space that's going to be additional retail space, or is that all part of the cafe and childcare center?
The cafe and the childcare center take up that entire
Wow.
Third Street facade. So the cafe, about 25 to 30% of it. The childcare internal components take up the middle chunk that you see in light blue on that drawing. The outdoor area is the space on the corners, about a little under 5,000
Oh, I'm
square
sorry, I
feet.
didn't see that from here. So the only 2 activation points at the street level are the childcare facility and the cafe?
Along Third Street, those are the two uses, correct? And then the entry that also accesses the meeting rooms on that level. So those meeting rooms are expected to be highly used and will add more population to the ground level. Those are located just behind the childcare in the middle of the floor plate. So they're not visible from the outside, but they will bring population down to this level of the building.
Those meeting rooms would be available for public use. You would have, it's the same kind of program that's available now through CalSTRS with some of their training rooms.
So I know there's a lot of rules around childcare regulations, the number of square feet you need to have for a number of kids and how that all pencils out. So was there any thought or consideration into putting any additional retail or other mixed-use kind of space on that first level? It just feels like you're going to have two kind of focal points on each end of the block, and then the middle is going to be kind of, I don't want to use the word dead, but inactivated, except for people crossing, which feels a little different to me.
Well, it depends on your perspective of children, I guess, because it will be pretty active, but I take your point that it won't be people moving in and out of the building at the childcare frontage. There will be a lot of activity going on inside the space, but the childcare space is sized right at the optimal limit of a smaller center, and
We're talking like 60 kids?
we're a little higher than that. 60 to 70 would be the low end that you can make pencil. Sounds like you know this business pretty well.
More than I'd like.
So we're a little higher than that right now, but within the confines of what we can do at that Third Street, yeah, we're,
And the outdoor space for the childcare center is all covered?
correct.
Okay, so let me just say, for the record, I'm super stoked about this project and really excited about it. At the same token, one of my biggest frustrations about Third Street and the way it's been designed thus far is it's completely inactivated space. We have, and I appreciate my comments from my colleague about the reflectiveness, but I also understand you're competing with a giant pyramid that lights up at night. So I get the desire to have some design and really make the building stand out, and I appreciate the design efforts that gone into it. But I do struggle with having another block that, while somewhat activated, is probably not going to be as activated as I would have hoped it would be. My vision and my thoughts when I heard about this Third Street being activated was the cafe, the childcare, but the childcare going back, not going across Third Street, which just really limits your opportunity to have additional activation on that street, which I think would have been really helpful, especially in tying to some of the other development we're seeing the opposite direction from the giant pyramid next door.
Yeah, as you probably know, it's very difficult to go deep with childcare because you are required to have exits from each classroom. And so the classrooms, which are the most active spaces, will be on the facade. The upside to that is if there is ever a change of use for this building in the future, if there's a reason for it to be something different, it would subdivide and be set up to be a number of active use spaces in the future. So from a long-term standpoint, I think it is responding to the desire of what this street wants to be.
I guess my only other thought, so is the cafe going to operate relatively the same as it is now? Or are we going to do night and weekend operations? Is it a different vendor?
That's still open to interpretation. We're thinking about, because our current cafe is open to the public, although I don't think there's a lot of people that know that, because it's not.
Just all my employees.
Yeah, DGS, because they don't have a cafe right now, so we certainly are impacted by that. We've got lots of people coming over from DGS. However, the current facility, our current cafe closes around 1:30 and stays open until 3 for things like coffee and grab and go. We're anticipating that this cafe will probably be open longer than that, and longer hours, maybe even till 5 o'clock, until the building itself actually closes during regular business hours. So that is still open for interpretation. It really depends on the operator that we hire to manage that.
But no desire to do night or weekend service?
I think that we're looking at a way to actually have the cafe open, if I'm not mistaken, because I haven't been in all the design meetings, but to have the cafe be able to be separated from the long hallway that goes into our lobby. So that way there might be an opportunity to be able to close off the building so you could enter that cafe on the weekends or after hours. So that would be something that we definitely could consider.
Okay.
And as far as parking, just to kind of go back on parking, our parking garage is impacted right now. So we've for the first time, put our employees on a waiting list. So in anticipation of the open lot being constructed on, we know that those 150 cars are going to have to go in our parking structure, and currently we don't have enough room for them. So, and then as we expand the parking structure with our headquarters expansion, the number of parking spaces that are going to be there are not going to equate to the number of employees we're going to have in that building eventually. So I know it looks underutilized, but it definitely is not. It's impacted right now.
Yeah, I think I was speaking more towards after 5, Monday through Friday.
Oh, got it. Definitely. Definitely. During the day, after 5, we're definitely not impacted.
And that's kind of where up here, I put on my different hat, and I think about, what about the time when we're not all there? And what does that place look like and feel like? Because that's going to be the experience most of the residents of the city are experiencing is, when they're parking there to go to the Riverwalk or to Rayleigh Field, and what does it look like? What does it feel like? What are the options available to them? And right now, it's really limited, and I'm again very excited about this project. I feel like it could go a little further in creating more options to activate that stretch, which is challenged and certainly not by anyone's fault here.
Sure.
Already.
Sure.
One more question, because I'm surprised my colleague, Mr. Liebig, didn't ask this. The existing trees that are along 3rd Street, are they staying, or will we be replanting?
We'll be replacing them. The concern is that they wouldn't make it through construction, and we do have an image in the packet that you received that showed how those interface with the existing face of the building, so we'll be replacing them with new trees.
Yeah, I knew they didn't line up, but then I saw the picture of the beautiful mature tree there, and I thought maybe by chance, there would be immediate shade of those lovely outdoor seating.
We are going to aim for the largest caliper that we can afford to put in, that we know will take and grow, but yeah, there will be some growth time to get back to where they are today.
Okay. Thank you very much for indulging me.
Thank you, Commissioner Sternfeld. Commissioner Sablan.
Thank you for your presentation. It was really helpful to see all the materials after reading this and seeing it and being able to feel it. I think my question might be for staff. So how was the 36-foot setback set? Like, how was that determined it should be at 36 feet for the 20-foot setback?
So the 36-foot is referenced in the description of Raleigh's Landing, River 3, and it's also referenced in the EIR, and it's referenced in the Washington specific plan.
Okay, so why was it set at 36 feet? And how is that impacted by going up an additional 14 feet?
I think it was originally referenced in the EIR, in the Raleigh's Landing document, because it was referenced in the Washington plan. And my understanding is that it's to create that kind of tight-knit, pedestrian-friendly environment.
Okay. And I guess, how is that going to be impacted by it going higher? I don't know, maybe that's
It's a really good question, and it's something that on a lot of urban planning projects, we spend a lot of time trying to understand the relationship between the street width, the heights of the buildings, and the relationship of the development around it. If you were talking about a much narrower sidewalk or a much narrower overall street width, then we would probably be recommending that we stay with a lower height. We do here have 18 foot from the building face to the curb, which, as I mentioned, is very generous. That's more generous than most urban environments, downtown urban environments. And so going up to essentially 5 stories, and 5 low stories in this case, because they're 10 feet parking garage, feels very comfortable as an urban environment, and is probably even a little on the shy space from what other cities are approving. So the 36 I haven't seen for an urban environment quite that low, so I think you're still within a very comfortable range at 50.
okay. Yeah, so I guess I was just trying to get at if there was some policy thinking of this is the right number of 36, or is it just arbitrary as in, this is what we think?
Trying to figure that out as well. The only thing I could come up with is there was a reference in the development agreement about 4 levels of parking. And Charlene might know 4 levels of parking, and a guardrail would be roughly 36 feet, was one thought.
So I believe the 36 feet came from an industry standard back around the late 80s, early 90s, because where the 2 documents that reference that,
were dated 1986 and 1995. So I would say that that is more of a dated standard for measuring pedestrian scale and where the pedestrian eyes might travel. Back in those days, the 12-foot story standard, so that it was really looking at 3 stories. If you apply that similar standard, looking at them going up another 14 feet, it's basically about 1 more story. And given the intent of Plan Development 30, which is in the very beginning, and it talks about that Plan Development 30 was originally developed to be guidelines and to really promote innovation and efficiency and sustainable maintenance along the waterfront and its development. So when we looked at that major intent, it talks about how the standards in PD 30 should be flexible so that it doesn't get in the way of an innovative design or a sustainable design. And so that's some of the trade-off that we were looking at, and the fact that being able to extend the parking floors, the existing parking floors out, and being able to get that additional parking that would be available to the public, even though we're still having a conversation with CalSTRS about trying to open up the hours more. We felt that was a good trade-off, and there was some innovation there. And also, the fact that all the climate measures that they are taking and trying to achieve very low energy use is also very important to us. And we felt it was important to Plan Development 30. So I don't know if that helps, but there was nothing in the history that we could find where there was some like firm 36. So we think that's where it came from. All right.
Okay, that's definitely very helpful, and because I was looking at it, it's like we're getting more energy efficiency, more parking, but what are we losing in this 14 feet? But it sounds like maybe not much at all.
It does not appear so.
Okay.
Yes, we even asked them to do shadowing study, as was done the first round, to compare to make sure that there wasn't going to be any increase in shadowing, and it appears that it is either equal or less shadowing. So.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Berlinger.
So thank you so much for your presentations. They were really thorough, so thank you. I guess my only question is about bicycle infrastructure. So will there be bike parking?
Yeah, we are accommodating intermittent parking along Third Street. It's not, you can't see it visibly there, but there will be some over there and also on the north side.
Okay.
And there will be bike parking inside the garage and the building for staff.
Will there be lockers or will it just be racks?
We're still figuring that out. but
Okay.
Combination of, probably combination of both. but-
All right, thank you.
Great, thanks for those comments, and thanks for the presentation, and I thought it was pretty thorough, and a lot of comments from commissioners as it relates to parking, retail, the flow of operation, and we hope that you take those comments, and as you plan through this, as you go through this process, kind of take those comments into consideration. I personally like the larger floor plates, the fact that the floors are, bring it down from 7 to 5, and prevents shading and things like that from the homes that are in the area. I think is very helpful, but I do agree with comments made from my fellow commissioners about the parking and how we can utilize that space. I know whenever we talk about other developments in the area, we always we talk much about parking, but then it ends up always being less parking than what we end up agreeing with up here as a commission. But we recognize the city's policy as it relates to parking, but when there's an opportunity like this, I think it's always important just to take that into consideration, that especially in that area where we want it to be activated and it gets pretty busy at times, that can be a challenge. But appreciate the presentation, and I realize that I did not open the public hearing, and I don't have any requests to speak cards, but I'll go ahead and open the public hearing really quick. If we don't have any requests to speak cards, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing.
Can I actually request that you keep it open for some
Sure.
of our deliberation, just in case?
Absolutely.
I have a feeling that some of our
And
comments
we'll,
may actually go back to
be
that.
able to ask you questions, and we'll keep the public hearing open and bring it back to the commission for discussion. So with that, I'll go ahead and bring it to commissioners for discussion. We'll start on my left. Commissioner Sternfeld, any additional comments?
No, I mean, this is a kind of an interesting one because I think the scope of our review is quite limited to very old documents. And the reality is what's presented in my mind hits the nail on the head for most of those things. That said, there are things about it I think could be improved upon, for lack of a better term. I really think another, even like a small maker space in between those two would make a huge difference as far as like just kind of activating the street front. But other than that, I'm happy with the project, and I think those things may work themselves out over time, but in terms of the scope of what's before us, I don't have any design concerns or concerns about what's before us not being consistent with the previous EIR and the resolution we're being asked to approve.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Sablon? Additional comments?
No additional comments.
Awesome. Commissioner Berliner?
No additional comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Vu?
No, I think this is a great project, and looking forward to seeing it done and complete. But yeah, no, I think I just share some of the questions and concerns about the parking that other commissioners have raised, and know that we often, for that area, every time we look at new developments, whether new apartments or what have you, we always look at the parking situation and how we can better use the available spaces, so.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonard, any additional comments?
A little more on parking, and it's just with the relationship of the cafe seating in the planting area and the travel lane of Third Street. I see cars there. I'm not sure if they're actually driving by or they're supposed to be parked, but if that's an actual lane, and I'm sorry, I'm not entirely familiar with the street section there, I don't believe that I would feel comfortable sitting at that table while traffic is flying by. But there's also a bike lane, so maybe that works. I don't have any specific requests. I mean, our scope is really limited to the facade and the design, which I think is very aesthetically pleasing, and it works well. So thank you for the time that you spent and putting all this together for us.
Thank you. Vice Chair Liebig?
Thank you. One, I appreciate all the attention to the detail on the materials to play with light and allow for relief on kind of a big, bulky, blocky building. So, I mean, that's what you have to play with, and so you kind of want to break that up, and I definitely appreciate that. Two points of clarification I want to make, because we are voting on the EIR as well, modification. So, Seamus, there is a setback from the street, and I want to make sure that this is within the setback approved in the EIR.
So the project description in the Rayleigh's Landing River 3 references the setback of 18 feet, and it mentions the structured parking being above the ground floor commercial uses. So the project description for Rayleigh's Landing River 3 is what was used for the EIR.
Okay, thank you. And the reason I'm asking that is because the Washington specific plan requires 30 feet, but in this case, the EIR has already approved the setback, and that was one of my concerns in that one, so thank you so much. And the other one, and this is why I asked we keep the public hearing open, the childcare, is there a drop-off pickup location? Are we just assuming that these are CalSTRS parents mostly?
No, we do imagine that there will be people from outside of CalSTRS as well, and there is a drop-off and pickup dedicated spaces that will be identified on Waterfront and would enter through the front lobby of the building and then into the childcare facility. We felt that was the best location because it's the lowest traffic speed area, and it allows people to drop off without entering any lanes.
Okay.
Thank you, and I don't have any additional comments as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for additional discussion or a motion to, or a motion. Any additional comments? All right,
Just for clarification, I haven't heard any changes. No? So one could move the recommended action.
correct.
Without having to read that really, really long statement. So I will do that. I will move the recommended action.
there's a motion to move the recommended action by Vice Chair Liebig. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Commissioner Bertiner. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you.
Right, and for anyone who, at home who are otherwise is tracking this project, I'll lead it right now, it's tentatively scheduled to go to City Council on May 15th.
We'll move on to item number 3. Public hearing on proposed general plan amendments and rezone from mixed-use neighborhood commercial to business park and related Southport Framework Plan Development Agreement, Plan Development 21 amendments in Southport Industrial Park.
Yep, Chair Castillo, if it would be possible, could we recess for about 5 minutes so our previous applicants can collect their materials?
Absolutely.
And then we can resume at 7 o'clock approximately?
Sounds good. We'll go ahead and recess for the next 5 minutes.
We're not laughing at you.
We are going to resume the meeting of the Planning Commissions. We're on item 3, public hearing on proposed general plan amendments and rezone from mixed-use neighborhood commercial to business park and related Southport Framework Plan Development Agreement, Planned Development 21 amendments in Southport Industrial Park. And I believe we have one of our fellow commissioners who needs to recuse himself.
Yes, I need to recuse myself because of property ownership nearby. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Leonard. All right, we'll wait until Commissioner Leonard exits the room, and then we will resume. Thank you. All right. We'll go ahead and start. Mr. Hardy.
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, back with you after our initial study session and continuance on the reference project. I want to go through, just for sake of, it's been a while since our study session, and for those that may not have been here or viewing from afar or in the audience weren't hearing this before. So what we have is the location in Southport known as SIP, otherwise officially known as Southport Industrial Park in Southport, which is adjacent to the port area in the northwest corner of Southport. So this is the overall view of the entire area of the industrial park. If you can go to the next slide. Zoned in more specifically where the project site arrow zeroes in is the actual project site of which is before you. Adjacent is vacant BP, vacant M1 are the adjacent zoned land use properties. Across from the project site is MUNC, and it's currently vacant, which is the same zoning and land use designation of the property and before you tonight. Next one. So a little bit of background, I'll quickly go over it. The original SIP project was approved in 1982 under the county. In 1983, PD 21 was adopted, again with the county. 1990 was amended with design criteria when this, just after the city incorporated. In 97, it was amended again, which included improvements, including the Palmadeski Bridge. Over the lifetime of the industrial park, really 3 ownerships. The current one is Ridge Capital, which is the applicant tonight. The original industrial park was, land use was MU, which it still is currently. In 2016, under general plan update, the NC, neighborhood commercial, was added, so you have a hybrid zone, which in theory would allow for a greater array of potential uses. And that was done officially late 2016, so almost early 2017. So roughly 2 years it's been about what it is now. It's also in the Southport Framework Plan, which was about 96 it was approved, which included the 4 villages, which came after the industrial park was originally approved. The part of the SIP land use designation, the way it was designed was you have your intensity would be in the northwest corner, and as you move towards the outskirts of the south and the east, you would lower the intensity of the uses. So the entitlements that the applicant is seeking, again, are to change from the current MUNC, mixed-use neighborhood commercial, to business park. And the zoning would be likewise. It would require an amendment to PD 21, amendment to the DA, and the Southport Framework Plan to amend any of those documents to reflect the changes that, if ultimately the project was approved, or what form it is, if we're to move forward. The raised issues we brought forth were, typically when you have a land use designation or general plan amendment request, a is identified with a specific use. This one does not have one. Therefore, you're sort of what-if conditions, if the items that they're being requested under BP would go there, what would some of the potential impacts be? So we tried to give some of those ideas of what they would be and what some of the mitigations that were proposed previously in the February meeting, such as no truck docks within 350 feet, the 8-foot wall, masonry wall, which was already constructed, setback landscape of 15 feet, and the maximum building height of 36 feet was identified there. In the staff report, I have it conditioned to 45 feet overall. Again, as we talked before, along Ramco Street, we're pursuing a no parking on the new stretch of Ramco Street that intersects with Promenade. In the study session, the Planning Commission raised, some issues and gave staff some direction. Again, it was limitations on the project site since no project was identified accompanying this request that did concern the commission, that holistically that was tended to be an issue. So at the end, it was come back with sort of land uses that are more transitional in nature. Attached in the staff report is a matrix of the 96 zoning code, because that's what they're vested in, and identified the red highlighted areas or the permitted conditional in the BP zone that are transitional or compatible with the project site. The highlighted red and yellow background are uses already permitted by right, conditional in MU zone, and transitional and compatible with the project site. The highlighted green uses are staff level conditional use permits that are aligned with transitional uses that aren't permitted, and the crossed out areas are currently permitted or conditionally permitted in the BP and MU zones, which are not considered, in staff's opinion, transitional based upon what we discussed. So I put that matrix together and identified the uses and as the transitional uses that the Commission had recommended. We didn't include any industrial uses. The applicant had submitted a letter, which is attached to your staff report, requesting uses that aren't in the matrix of what we consider transitional, and thus we didn't bring those uses before you. Their letter, and the applicant can address that specifically with you during their presentation. The other part was, the Commission identified no industrial typical uses, hence transitional, limit the impacts to the adjacent residents to the south, and it's sort of a gateway to the community. And again, no specific project, it was hard to identify any potential interface and impacts a business would create when you don't know what the business is and what their uses are and hours of operation and vehicles and such. A letter was received today. You received it as you walked in. The letter essentially is supportive of the transitional type use that the staff proposed based on the direction of the Commission. They are not in favor of the bulk storage warehouse type uses. The applicant, again, is requesting those specific uses. They are not supportive of those. And the letter does have a question stated in there, have all other uses with the current zoning in place been exhausted? I can't answer that question. I would have to have the applicant do that, but it's highlighted in the letter. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy, for that presentation. Before I open up the public hearing, I want to just see if commissioners have any questions to Mr. Hardy, and then we'll bring up the applicant for a presentation. And I have one request to speak card for public comment, so we'll go from there. So we'll start with, on the right, Commissioner Vu?
No, but I may have some later.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Liebig?
Justin, thank you. You just mentioned in the letter a reference to a bunch of zones. I read the letter. Actually, can you just point to what you're talking about? We did get this today, and so I did read it. I just wanted to know exactly what you're referring to, where you mentioned a bunch of zones that the applicant would need to go through.
The letter that was submitted identified that the transitional zones that staff had put in the staff report, they agreed with.
Okay.
Or were supportive of that idea. They were not supportive of the industrial bulk storage, indoor storage warehouse that was attached in the staff report from the applicants. They were not in favor of that, and that was in their first two paragraphs of their letter. And then at the very end, they do discuss, have other uses been exhausted in research to develop the property under the current zoning.
Okay.
That's what she identified.
Thank you so much. Thanks for jumping back to that.
Thank you. Commissioner Sternfels?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hardy. I did have a couple questions. The first one, I wanted to talk a little bit about going back to general plan, because either the last staff report or this one mentions that we, as part of the general plan update, added, I think, the neighborhood commercial designation to both this site and the site across the street. Is that correct?
Prior to that general plan, the site across the street was a commercial site, just neighborhood commercial. So we did make that change at the applicant's request to go to the mixed use with the property across the street to try to get much more flexibility since we haven't really gotten many even, serious nibbles on that property, all this time.
And then the general plan chapter on urban design, would the values and policy statements in that chapter apply to this area? They apply to the whole, any project in the city, is that correct?
We'd have to be cognizant of their vesting status from the previous approvals from the 90s. But I think those policies and current general plan could still very well be a guide in terms of where we're trying to go now.
And then I guess my final question is, one of the things we talked about last time around, and I really want to make sure we spend some time discussing tonight, is part of the concern that I heard from both myself and several of my colleagues was that a lot of us viewed this as a gateway to the Bridgeway Lakes, Bridgeway Island development, because so many folks use the Southport Parkway to get there. And our general plan, particularly in the urban design chapter, speaks quite a bit about community gateways and unique and individual gateways and policy goals around them. But none of those goals were cited in the staff report as supporting the staff recommendation. And so is there consensus among city staff that this should be considered for our purposes a community gateway, at least this entrance area and the parcels around it?
Community gateways in that context were really more, I think, citywide gateways, coming into town, leaving town. I don't know that those were really crafted to reflect, an entrance into one particular neighborhood. But that's really up to the commission to really interpret how those were prepared and how those of you who were on the commission at that time, when you recommend approval of the general plan to council, how your thought process was on those policy statements, which by nature of a general plan are, fairly broad.
Very well. So I do want to come back maybe at some point after hearing from the applicant during our public discussion and talk about the applicability of the urban design policies and the general plan. I'd appreciate that, give you some time maybe to confirm or deny their applicability. I didn't see anything in there that would preclude them. Those are all my questions for the moment. Thank you, Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Commissioner Sternfels. Commissioner Sablon? Commissioner Berliner?
No comments at this time.
Right, we'll go ahead, and I don't have any comments at this time. We'll go ahead and give the applicant an opportunity to make a presentation or comments. I will go ahead and open the public hearing. If you want to come up and identify yourself, or you have any comments that you'd like to make, and then we have one request to speak card as well.
Chair Castillo, Commissioners, thank you again. So just a couple of clarifications.
Can you identify yourself just?
My name is
to-
Michelle Azevedo with Ridge Capital, applicant. I'm here with Mike Diebenbrock, also with Ridge Capital. He might pop up here in a minute. Just a couple of clarifications in the staff report. Ridge Capital is not the official owner of this property. We represent the ownership. We are the asset manager for the ownership, which is technically Southport Business Park Land Fund 10, since 2012. I think I stated in our workshop a couple of weeks ago that we've been involved with the property since 2012, and over that time frame, we have been talking to various types of brokers and users that could potentially be located on this particular piece of land, and there has been no interest. Restaurants, retail, commercial types of uses do not find that there is enough demand there. If they're going to spend their rent money somewhere, it's going to be on a major thoroughfare, which would be Jefferson or, West Capitol, or even, I can never remember where the Palm DC Bridge is, over by the Lowe's shopping center. Those are big shopping centers, Nugget, Lowe's. It really does attract most of those types of users for the area. The park was designated for industrial uses back in the 80s, and frankly, that is what it has been built out for. There is a large BP zoning within the park, which there was hopes for office buildings and so forth, but office has not been successful there. We have made many proposals to office users, and they are just, in the public's mind, it is an industrial park, and those are the uses that have been attracted to that park. I think we have done a fairly fine job of building nice buildings and attracting Fortune, 500, 100, or at least Fortune 1000 companies, and creating jobs for the area. I know I am sympathetic to the neighbors. I would like to, if I have a couple of slides that I wanted to throw up on the board, to help support my position, our position, that the zoning should be opened up to fully all of the BP uses, because really the uses that we are looking for are what you're, precisely prohibiting with the rezone. Actually, can I see the site plan first? Maybe it's the third one up there. No, keep going, next one. So, the question which has come up from the public and you from the last time is, well, gosh, if you're not going to build an R&D building or some other kind of more neighborhood type of building, what would you build? This is a possibility. It is very likely something that we might consider building. And frankly, it's not going to impact the neighbors more than what is already approved. If you will see that building R1, you can see the little dotted line that kind of highlights the MU area. By right, we can already build those buildings in the adjacent properties. The height restriction for those properties is 45 feet, and while we did believe at the time that we were here 2 or 3 weeks ago that there was a 350-foot setback for dock areas, that actually doesn't apply to those lots 5 and 6 next door. There is the PD20, we're in PD21 here, I'm confusing it with the CalSTRS, specifically set forth a 350-foot dock restriction on the lots on the east side of the park, those residential lots where the canal is, does not apply to these lots. We have been mindful of that, though, with this particular design, and, should the rezone actually happen the way we would hope that it would, we would, keep to those setbacks. I wanted to show you what it would look like from the street view, because I think you'll see that from Southport Parkway, there's a big landscape berm there. You really can't see what's on the other side. But from Promenade Street, thank you, Katie. This would be a perspective view of that site plan from the corner of Promenade. I'm not super happy with the way the landscaping rendering turned out. I think it could be much more beautiful than that. But the buildings are set back, and what we had agreed to is putting storefront all along the ends of those buildings. So it, in fact, looks like an office building or more retail, flex type of space. So I don't think you would recognize it completely as an industrial building. Lots of landscaping, lots of trees, lots of parking, setback from the street. And then the other shot, Katie, thank you, that's actually from the corner of Southport Boulevard, looking across the street, from the corner south. So you wouldn't actually, we would try to screen any dock areas with a wall and/or landscaping and with gates, so that you could not just look in and see big trucks. And that is a very long distance from the corner to the actual building, so I think that it could be screened quite nicely. And this sort of layout, too, would help keep the trucks on Ramco Street and not on Promenade. That would be our goal for this whole project. Seems like I'm missing something. Am I missing it? That's basically the crux of our application. And believe me, if we could have put something really fun and pedestrian-friendly, we would do it, but yet there has to be demand there. And our job as the asset manager for the owner is to, put the land into production and make it a neighborhood, more of an asset than just a bare field with weeds.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Acevedo. Any questions for the applicant at this time, or do we want to bring up the public comment? Since we only have one request to speak card, I'll go ahead and call the applicant, and then if it's okay with you, the commissioners. Great. All right, we will have up the only request to speak card is Ms. Ada Saldivar. Please come up and identify yourself, please, for the record.
Yeah, my name is Aida Saldivar, and I'm concerned. I have lived in Anacapa Island Court for the last 19 years this time. And as the building progressed, at night we leave the windows open, typically in the summer because we like to save energy. And there is a building just a little bit beyond the lots that we're talking about that right now have probably at least 20 docks where trucks come in and out all night long. And I can tell you that, I sympathize that they're not able to sell the lots or to people that are not using heavy loads or heavy trucks, but I can tell you the noise over the summer, and I haven't gotten my neighbors to sign a petition or something, but there's a loudspeaker that goes on, phones that go on ringing nonstop at midnight and at 1 a.m. in the morning. The noise just carries on. The trucks are honking their horn after midnight. So what I have in mind, if something moves in there, that it would be office-like, where there's a limited amount of operation hours, or 8 to 5, where there's businesses that will close and we, the neighbors, will be able to not have to put up with all that noise. I'm definitely not supportive of bulk or commercial, because I think that will continue the noise. I went to those buildings and I tried to speak to somebody, but I think now that we left the windows open for the first time one night ago, I could hear the phones again. And it's really frustrating that I don't have anybody to ask to please not do that, because I guess it's the breeze from the Deepwater Channel that carries that noise around. So that's pretty much all I had to say. There's only 3 neighbors here tonight about this, but if you think it's prudent, I could get all my neighbors that suffer from that same noise to sign a petition.
Thank you, Ms. Saldivar.
Yeah.
Appreciate your comments.
Thank you so much.
That's the only request to speak card that I have at the moment. I'll bring it back to the commission for Questions for staff and the applicant? So I'll go ahead and leave the public comment open. Commissioner Stormfeld.
Ms. Acevedo, would you mind coming up? I wouldn't mind. So, and I'll keep it brief. It's a busy night for you. And I want to first say, like, totally recognize and appreciate Ridge Capital's participation in the community and all you guys do and the work you've done on this item, in the industrial park and other areas in town. You guys make a big difference in getting this town developed, and that's appreciated. I'm confused, though, because what staff has put before us tonight is to recommend a land use designation, a zoning change, but you presented a project to us, and I don't understand at this point which one. I know what's on the agenda, what I'm being asked to do, but I don't understand what certainty I have as a planning commissioner that what you just showed me is what gets built if we approve your item. So I'm hoping maybe you can help me walk through in your mind how we get there.
Unfortunately, I didn't bring the overall site plan, but, and I'm not, maybe we could flip back through there for the overall park plan. Well, let's just stop right there. This is, if you were to go out and look at the overall site plan, this is pretty traditionally what we've been building out there. Off of, the Cormark building, this is, building P is basically the Cormark building, only going the other way. All of the buildings, it's light industrial, it's not heavy industrial, so you're not going to get super tall buildings with ginormous footprints. This is pretty much the max that you would see. I can't guarantee you, I don't know what we would build, but this has been on the map for the last 6 years, something like this. I can tell you that we did do an acoustical study in 2012 or 13, and right now, the noises that the neighbors are hearing can, depending on the winds, be coming from, FedEx across the port, not necessarily from Southport Business Park. But one of the best sound barriers is the building. So when the buildings get built on Ramco Street, whether these or if the MU land is, adjusted to be its own lot and it doesn't get built out, whatever gets built off of Ramco Street will be a very good sound blocker for the noises coming from the interior portion of the park. Obviously, if the wind is blowing hard, I cannot prevent noise from coming across the channel.
I appreciate that. I want to make it clear that the slides that you shared with us tonight, you're under that's not a project that's before us. You're under no obligation to actually build that. This is just an idea you're floating at us.
A likely scenario.
Is there a worst-case scenario in terms of what it may look like? I'm sorry for interrupting, but...
Mr. Chair, this is your
I
show.
mean, no. I just want to make sure, since we're talking about the scenarios, and you presented a scenario that is a nice scenario, right, which doesn't seem like it's a lot of concerns, but is there another scenario that you can speak on that could potentially happen?
I'm Mike Diepenbrock, and Michelle and I work together, and with your permission, I'd like to participate in this. So we're in the business of selling land to users and developers. Sometimes we buy it ourselves, sometimes we sell it to other people. What this plan does is show, again, what is our best guess as to what would be sort of attractive to the marketplace, and also mitigate some of the sound issues that we've been trying to mitigate with the rest of our site plan. Again, that's putting the buildings along Ramco on the east side, backing up to the levee there. There's no better sound barrier than a 36-foot tall, 250-foot deep empty warehouse, or warehouse full of product. So and that was proven out in the acoustical studies we did. So no doubt there is noise today. No doubt we'll never end all of it. But the plan that we are developing is consistent with the plan to mitigate noise. To your specific question about what is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is that we would sell the land to somebody who would develop a project on this site that wouldn't respect the 350-foot setback that applies to the other properties, but does not apply to this property in PD 21. We've set this up with the goal of showing that we would prevent that from occurring by doing a plan like this. We're willing to put that 350-foot setback line on this property, on the entirety of this property, which today doesn't exist on any of it. So not just the piece that would be subject to before you for the rezone, but also to the balance of the site, of this site. So I hope it's not too technical, but to get back to, again, to a doomsday scenario, it's conceivable that by right, we could sell the property to somebody else who would not have the sensitivity to the setback issue or to where the truck docks pointed and where they didn't, and could be a noise generator beyond what we're proposing to do. Does that make sense, sir? And the last comment I'd make is that we say industrial, and industrial tends to have when you hear industrial, sometimes you think of smokestacks, and sometimes you think of R&D buildings. You know, these are the type of industrial that is permitted in the BP zone is a very benign sort of industrial. It's the buildings that exist there now in the BP zone that are industrial are full of food products, Snicker bars, that sorts of things. It's not going to be a place where there's going to be heavy manufacturing, there's going to be smokestacks, there's going to be, noxious fumes or anything like that. So anyway, I spoke too much.
Thank you. Commissioner Sternfeld, my apologies. Just
No, quite all right, Chair. Just one more question. So we usually see requests to change zoning or variances when we have a actual project before us, and that's really helpful because we can make decisions in context with the actual thing that's going to be there. And in this case, and we provided this feedback to Ms. Acevedo once already, that you're putting us in a very difficult position on the kind of trust us, and I actually do trust Melissa quite a bit, but on the future development of the site, without actually having to know for certainty what the project is that you're pursuing. So can you help me understand why in this case, you wouldn't find someone who's interested in the site and then come ask for the rezone versus must have this rezone now in order to develop the site?
Well,
Yeah, I know. It's kind of the chicken and the egg,
Yeah.
right? The deals that are coming want certainty, and without certainty, there's no deal. There was a deal circling, but there was uncertainty, and so it's gone elsewhere, hopefully within the city of West Sacramento. So there's just a few things that we can control as developers. There's things that are out of our control, and if you have anything that's out of your control, that's uncertainty, which is risk. People don't like risk. I mean, if you've got a Fortune 100 or 200 or 500 or whatever company coming, they want certainty, and you have to deliver. And if you have a time frame of 12, 24 months, there is not this time to be going through a rezone or other types of entitlement or public agency approvals, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, Michelle, you said that perfectly. I mean, basically, corporate facilities people don't get fired for paying too much rent. They get fired because they picked a site that couldn't be delivered. And so those people tend not to go to sites that have, if there's an alternative, they don't pick a site that has a discretionary entitlement process that spans many months in front of it. So it's not, as long as there is other real estate available that doesn't have these restrictions, they're going to select the other real estate. So the other issue is when you look at this parcel, it's not a standalone. It's a roughly a 30-acre parcel that really is crying out to be for us as planners. You really want to have the curb cuts set up. You want to have a site plan organized that envisions, an overall development plan. Very often, development plan gets tweaked. Most of the time, we try to conceive of something that we think is going to be really close. And any tweaks that show up by the time we show up at the building department or design review or whatever are pretty modest. But because of the fact of the way that the site is configured, it's very difficult for us to sell the rest of the property, develop the rest of the property, without considering how this piece affects it. Again, curb cuts, setbacks, and so forth. So it makes a lot more sense for us to conceive of the whole thing together, plan the whole thing together, take the whole thing to the market together and hopefully find more users that want to be there.
Sure, and I can appreciate that, and I thank you for the comments. At the same token, I want certainty too. I mean, that's kind of my job up here, and our colleagues is we're here to represent the community and ensure that we have certainty in kind of what gets built and how it gets built, particularly when somebody's asking you to do something that's outside the plan. And that's the request, and it's, as frequently as we've been very flexible and accommodating to requests to rezones and amendments to the general plan, it is a high bar that has to be met. And it's really hard for me to feel comfortable meeting it when we actually don't have a project before us. We just kind of have a series of what-ifs and a lot of goodwill. And so I'll save the rest of my comments for later, but I do want to, the argument goes both ways, I guess is kind of my point.
May I respond to that?
I'll leave that to the chair, but
Absolutely.
My questions are complete.
What we are trying to respectfully suggest is that there are things there are restrictions that you can put on the property that will address the big picture issues. For example, that 350-foot setback, let's put it across the entirety of the property, not just the piece to which we have the purview to apply it now. We'll put it across the whole thing, so we will address, I think, significantly the noise issue. Maybe make it, I'd say, as a acoustical study would say, it'll actually be better if we agree to that 350-foot setback across the entirety of the property, because you will have certainty that you will have a 36-foot tall, if not a 40-foot tall sound wall that's 250 feet deep that'll be represented by those buildings. The other things that I would suggest that hopefully mitigate the question that you have would be heavily landscaping the corners, agreeing to provide additional articulation, architectural sort of enhancement to that site, so you have those aesthetic issues addressed as well. So, anyway.
Thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner? You're good. All right. Commissioner Sablan.
So I guess one question I have is, if we approved staff's recommendation, what you're saying is that's not going to help you at all? Okay. And this might be a question for legal. Can we do some kind of conditional rezone?
Please explain what you're thinking.
We're approving it subject to some project before us, and then if we don't like the project, we can rescind the rezone?
You could continue the matter and have them bring it back with a project. That would be an option.
Okay. Okay, those are my only questions.
Commissioner Brenner.
He's gone.
Oh, no, Commissioner Brenner.
Okay, I thought, I'd heard Brian, so.
Hi, so I feel like I asked this the first time you guys came out here. The lots next to this lot, they're empty, right? Okay. And they're all zoned for business park, right? I think so. Yes? I'm just.
Everything else within that block is BP except for the little dotted area on the west side.
I just want to echo Commissioner Sternfeld and Commissioner Sablan about just not having a project and asking for it's my first year, but it just doesn't feel right to me. Just because you already have, and there's already empty land next to it. And so I don't necessarily see the purpose of this rezone when you don't have someone saying, hey, let's do this. So, does that make, you're looking at me looking crazy?
No.
Okay.
You're good, I'm just listening.
Okay, and that's it, so, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, I just wanted to point out also, in addition to coming back with a project, staff have also provided options for amending the PD to include conditions, which would also, is another avenue for addressing those types of concerns.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, Commissioner? No? All right. Commissioner Vu?
Yeah, I think my question plays off of Commissioner Berliner's a little bit, but why so much emphasis on this particular lot if there are, to convert this lot to BP, if there are other available lots adjacent to it and in other parts of the city that, the owners may have, why so much emphasis on this particular piece? Go ahead.
In 2012, there was 400 acres, 500 acres, owned by the Southport Business Park Land Fund 10 acquired from the bank, actually. This is it. They are down to this property right here and one little lot across the street. So it's kind of like we saved it for last. We were hoping there would be something that came along, but over the years, nothing really has. So this is it, basically. That's why we're here. We would like to, have a plan and, a development plan for them. It is feasible that these buildings could be built speculatively. That's how we have done several buildings, without necessarily having a project in hand, per se.
I just would like to add to that, again, it's a planning issue from our perspective. If we were to assume that line was hard and fast, the MU line, we would build something different on the rest of the property. We would, without knowing where that line is going to be, we would reconfigure the buildings. And so it's, again, it gets, to us, we try to define, we're trying to design 30 acres of a very good project. And with that piece as an out parcel, without knowing what the uses may or may not be permitted there, it affects what we can do with it. So it's a little, as Michelle said earlier, a little bit of a chicken or an egg. We feel like we need to design the whole thing so we can build any of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Wu. Vice Chair Liebig.
Can you expand on this line? I'm having it difficult. That is the project site. So the line you're referring to, are you referencing how it aligns with other lots and the conditions that are currently on those lots?
Well, so the dotted line that is delineating the MU piece,
Okay.
do you see that? It kind of runs from where it says Parkway down, kind of cattywampus and through Building R1.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I do see it. It is incredibly faint on our
Sorry.
screen. Okay.
So when we're saying the dotted line, the area to the west or southwest of that is the MU piece that we are talking about. So you can see that it's basically joined with the rest of the BP property.
Yeah, Commissioner Liebig, if you refer to attachment 2 in your staff report, that may be a little more clear for you in terms of the property that's in play here and the line that's shown on their particular exhibit is included in there. Parcel 1, as on this particular exhibit, attachment 2 really is the MU piece, and then parcels 2 and 3 are the existing BP sites that sort of comprise this corner of the business park. So the line that's on the screen follows that line on parcel 1 shown on this particular exhibit.
So the area to the left of the light dotted line is parcel 1.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, that's difficult for me to see on this. So I want to say, Commissioner Sternfeld's hit the nail on the head, exactly. This is a project, is probably approvable, but we're not approving a project, we're approving uses. And unless we overly condition this, and I don't really want to be overly prescriptive, it's very difficult to approve your request. And we can address aesthetics, we can address sounds, but my concern is when we do that, we're going to be really overly prescriptive on conditions, and that part, I don't think you'd like that either. It could be more useful if there were specific uses that you were interested in, and maybe we could deliberate on those, rather than saying all of the uses. I get where I definitely hear you though, and I understand where you're coming from. For everything that you've said about the difficulty with certainty, we're looking at the same exact thing. I think those are my only comments. If there are specific uses, and I'm not sure if I'm talking about the table in attachment 8. And because there are uses in there that I would be concerned about. And the purpose of us delaying the vote on this was to get some modification to transition the use from industrial to residential, something that softens that transition.
Well, in looking at the uses, I mean, there's really only two that you've excluded that we would want, and that had to do with the storage, indoor and outdoor storage. The rest, I mean, I really don't see there being a, large recycling place there that, I mean, we're not looking to do anything like that, or, there's plenty of mini storage in the area. We certainly wouldn't need to build anything like that. I mean, that, there really was only the two particular line items under storage that were most concerning, which had to do with, well, warehousing and wholesale sales, and then, sorry, I can't find it exactly, but it was the indoor and outdoor parking, warehousing.
There's a
Somewhere, I cannot
bulk
find-
storage indoor, and then there's an outdoor storage.
I don't think we can do anywhere, right?
We can't do outdoor storage.
Okay.
That's
BP doesn't
precluded.
permit that,
It's
right?
not it's just warehousing and indoor storage. Sorry.
Which would be consistent with the uses on Ramco, the Core-Mark use, the other buildings along Ramco, Saladinos, et cetera.
Okay, so I'm looking at the storage, I want to make sure I've got this clear. I'm hearing the request for bulk storage, indoor. Am I hearing, because you also mentioned warehouse, but then there's, unfortunately, warehouse comes with wholesale sales?
And I'm not sure if that's, maybe that's something else, a different meaning, but it's, I mean, bulk storage indoor, I don't have a line, but that's the one particular item. We can't do bulk storage outside. I'm not sure what warehouse and wholesale sales is, but isn't that warehousing?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what we consider Core-Mark and many of the other, Saladinos, the other building, to be warehousing and wholesale sales. I think that's, form-wise, bulk, indoor storage and warehousing may appear very similar. I think the difference is that, somebody like a Core-Mark has products that they're presumably, taking to retail.
That gets this list down to something that's digestible, and that I think we could potentially condition without having to go crazy.
I would just like to add that parking as a primary, a number of these facilities today, warehouses have changed dramatically, as you may well know. An Amazon.com facility employs 2,500 people, the one out at the airport does. So as we get into e-commerce sorts of uses, the parking requirements may go up. And so it's conceivable that we could have a tenant, for example, that would be interested in building P, that would have an extensive amount of employees. An e-commerce user would be the logical person who would do that. And so if we could get some flexibility on being able to use the property for parking in support of a use in one of the other buildings, that would be great. Not necessarily a drop lot, but parking in support of one of the other uses within that, what we call the island parcel.
Would you be doing a parcel adjustment or joining these parcels? Otherwise, you'd have to do a reciprocal parking or something like that, and I'm not sure that the city would have to weigh in on that.
We anticipate a lot line adjustment, one way or the other, for this particular
Okay.
case.
I would still need the city probably to step in, because parking for the sake of parking isn't generally approved. You would have to work with the buildings, right? So if you combined the parcels into one, that's a different topic than just putting parking on one parcel.
Any other comments, Commissioner DeBig? Any other comments for now? We'll bring it back for discussion.
No, if those are the two, changes that are being requested, I think we have something that we could possibly talk about. Maybe not, but.
Okay.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, appreciate those comments. Just really quick, you know, I know you mentioned that this property was designated as industrial back in the 1980s. And as community develops, as you know, as communities develop, sometimes what was zoned back in the 1980s changes significantly. And we need to take that into consideration as communities grow and more people live within those communities. We need to be mindful of those community concerns as a commission. And so a very thorough review in terms of what needs to be done here is warranted. But also, I agree with Commissioner Liebig that we also don't want to be overly prescriptive, right? And it seems like, based on the comments that we provided and the feedback that we provided at our previous meeting, at the last meeting, when we discussed this issue, the result was already prescriptive, which now you're not supportive of, right? Or you are not necessarily supportive of. And so I'm just afraid that without a project for us to consider, that we're going to continue to add additional conditions, and that may not work for the applicant, you know, moving forward as you market this particular property. And so that's a concern. And I do, you know, as someone who lived over in that community, this noise is a concern. And I hear the community and Ms. Saldivar's comments. She is not the only one, I'm sure, that feels that way. The noise is an issue. And I trust that when you say you're going to, you know, build these buildings to a point where they also will be a barrier between the community and the space here, that's going to mitigate noise. I don't know for a fact that would actually happen, aside from just taking your word for it, right? And so I think we'll bring it back to discussion for the commission. But in the meantime, are there any additional questions or comments to the applicant? If not, we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the applicant for discussion. All right. Thanks. Go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you. Bring it back to the commission for discussion. All right. So, any comments, any commissioner have any comments at the moment on what they're thinking in terms of?
Well, I guess I'll start. So this is a tough one, because, and as many of my colleagues, like, I am very much for the timely and good development of our community. It's important, especially if it's an economic development project. I certainly appreciate the creation of jobs and expansion of infrastructure in our community. But I have some fundamental disagreements with the site and how we're looking at it even tonight, because we're looking at it very singularly. We're looking at this site and what the owners and the property asset managers want to do with this site in relationship to other sites they own. But the context that I look at the item before us is not that. It is the area around this site, which includes not just the community, and the thing I think I'm struggling the most with is the parcel across the street on Promenade. And the reason that becomes a real challenge for me is because when we approved the general plan, we made both of those parcels neighborhood commercial. We made that change. We added that land use designation to both of those parcels on each side of Promenade. And when I was weighing in and deliberating on that decision to do that, along with several other zoning changes we made through that process, the reason we did that was going back to the urban design criteria and this idea of having gateways to our communities. And my view on this was that Promenade has become, for better or worse, because of how Southport Parkway is used, a gateway to the Bridgeway Islands, Bridgeway Wood Lakes community.
Yeah, and just wanted to clarify
address
my
that.
earlier comments. The current general plan section you're referencing does refer to entryways, which are into neighborhoods. It's not just, citywide gateways.
I did want to address that there is a, DA for this area, and under Government Code Section 658, 65.2, they have vested rights, and so, you're not going to be imposing new restrictions on the development under the new general plan.
No, and I'm not looking to impose new, but for a general plan change, we have to find two things. We have to find that it's desirable, which I have struggled doing with the conflict in policies. And I don't agree, just now I'm going to be super clear, with some of the arguments in support of the general plan guidelines that we have used to justify the decision. But moreover, I can't find that the amendment is consistent to the general plan because we're proposing to change one parcel based on a single need of a single applicant when we initially made the decision to make both of those parcels that designation, in my mind at least, when I made the decision, because it was a gateway to the community, and because we wanted to have a downgrade of transitional uses between the business park and the neighborhood.
Okay.
And so, for me, that's ultimately where I struggle. I would love to approve a project for this, but we don't have a project before us. And my other issue is, when we did this last time, my ask was, bring back a project. We will say yes. We will find a way to get there. We had expressed kind of our desires for what we want it to look like and what would be okay and what would not be okay, but that's not what's come back tonight. What's come back is a staff recommendation that the applicant disagrees with. The applicant's asking us to take a different recommendation than staff. So either one of two things: either this isn't ready for us to make a decision, in which I'd support a continuance on if the applicant wanted that, or it's not a project that's ready at all, and I would support denial of it. But those are really the only two places I'm at, because I don't want to, in this meeting, at this hour, start nickel and diming and conditioning specific uses and entitlements and things like that, not knowing all the details of the DA and what we could actually do versus not do. I think we get into a sticky spot if we're going to try to move down that path tonight. So I want to be clear to the applicant. I want to support a project here. I want to support development here, but I can't do it with what's been presented to me tonight, both by staff and in the presentation. There's not enough consistency in anything we're doing, but even between what's being said between the staff and the applicant. So either this needs more time, or I think we need to say no for now until the applicant come back and work with city to come back with a different proposal. So there, done.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner Sternfels. Commissioner Sablan.
So yeah, I agree somewhat with Commissioner Sternfels. And if we approve what's before us, recommended by staff, it's not going to help the applicant. And I don't think we want to sit here and add these two uses back and figure out what conditions need to be imposed to make it fit with that area. So I would recommend continuing it, and maybe applicant can work with staff to see if there are conditions that can be imposed with those additional uses.
Commissioner Berliner.
I'm going to say come back to us with a project, because I support economic development, I support bringing more jobs here, but you don't have that, so, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Vu. Vice Chair Liebig.
Difficult spot. I agree with Commissioner Sternfels. I do think that we could possibly come to some agreement on a couple of use changes, but again, I see the point on piecemealing. So, and we would be here for a long time to do that. I'm willing to put in the work, but if it's not feeling right, it's not feeling right. So, I think they have a point with the project. So that said, we have made zoning changes before. I would be open to it, narrow scope, and make sure we address the concerns of the neighborhood and transitioning it. That said, I don't know if we're requesting a continuance or not. And I think I might like to hear from the applicant to get their feedback before we make a determination.
And perhaps city staff. Right. Any other comments before I can bring up the applicant again? If you guys would like to add something, I'll open up the public comment really quick, and then we'll open up the public comment. And if you want to
package deal.
Come up, Mr. Diefenbrock.
We understand the concerns. We're happy to work with staff. If you continue it and come back with a project, I think we could get close enough in a guess as to what the project would look like. Perhaps we refine what was shown on the screen tonight and attachment, and come back and say this is our project, and within a standard of substantial conformance. we could live with that. And perhaps that would give you the opportunity to say that these uses are acceptable in the context of the whole project.
Thank you. Ms. Acevedo, anything you'd like to add? No? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public comment. Any comments from staff?
Yeah, I think it would be benefit to staff for some clarification for the planning commission, from the planning commission about the uses, and is that at our previous discussion on this item, the commission talked about the concept of transitional uses. So what we brought forward to you tonight was our attempt to try to get there in terms of the transitional uses, noting that at the prior meeting, the commission didn't completely close the door on this land use change, but also it appeared to staff that they didn't want to do a completely carte blanche, either. So we were trying to find that sweet spot in the middle. But really what this seems to be boiling down to is whether or not the commission is comfortable with warehouse and distribution uses on this particular property, the mixed-use property, the 7.7 acres. Because that's sort of a fundamental question for us, and it seemed to us that didn't fit into the transitional use concept that the commission expressed to us at our last meeting. And so clearly what the applicant is requesting is to still to be allowed to do warehouse and distribution on this property. So that seems to be a fundamental that we need to get certainty on from the commission, because we can work on design matters and this and that, but for the transitional use concept, if that is still the direction the commission would want to go on this, it would be very helpful to know if those types of uses would be something that you could entertain in any way, shape, or form, even with the truck dock setbacks and other potential, site planning criteria. Because that does seem to be the crux of the issue, at least to staff, is the desire to expand those kinds of uses onto this property, which did seem to be not congruent with the commission's previous direction at our workshop on this earlier this year. So it would be, I think, of great benefit to know if fundamentally if the commission is open to those kinds of uses on this property or not.
Thank you, Mr. Tilly, and I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. I think the challenge is, too, that on our previous meeting, we also didn't have a concrete project, and so we came up with some of the recommendations that we gave were based on discussions that we had here that evolved out of our discussion, but resulted in this. And it makes it hard for us it seems like now we're kind of going back and forth because we don't have a project, right? And so if the docking and storage were an exception and there was a proposal by the applicant, then that's something that we can definitely consider and take a look at to then have a discussion amongst the commissioners on what that impact will be to the community, or would it not be to the community. And so just something to keep in mind as we kind of bring it up for discussion, but and that's probably why we're kind of going back and forth, because we don't have a project for this particular property. So with that, I'll bring it back to commissioners, starting on my right, Commissioner Vu.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with deciding on any conditions right now without knowing what the project would be, because there might be a project that wouldn't need any conditions at all, for all we know.
The question I'm going to ask, so it's going to, I would like to hear it anyway, is whether or not we are comfortable with warehouse and bulk storage to begin with. And that, I mean, it's a fair question. So if we're not, then I think we know where this is going. If we are with certain conditions, then that's this, I think we have a couple of paths. I think staff is looking for this, and I would be looking for this as well. Are we comfortable with those options to begin with? And then move on? Or on this property, do we view storage, bulk storage and warehousing as not an appropriate use?
I think I'm comfortable with starting with base zero and just having all options available, as long as we know what a prospective project may look like. Because we may not need any specific conditions or say this is okay, this isn't okay. saying that, we may not need any of those now, right? And then, just start from that basis, and then if we, because the project that comes to us, we may not need any of those conditions, or, so, just to say, no, we're okay with this now, we're not okay with this, before we even know what is, no, I'm not comfortable with that.
Just a question for staff really quick. If we were to, kind of what Commissioner Vu suggested as it relates to opening it up for any particular project, right, whether it's bulk and storage, put that back on the table. It doesn't necessarily mean that if there is a project as it relates to bulk and storage, that we would actually, it would have to come to the commission and we'd have to approve with conditions, correct? Any project?
Not under the current paradigm. If this land use change goes forward, then whatever permitted uses accompany it, they would be able to build by right, and the only criteria that would be applied with what's in PD 21 currently, or anything that we would add through this particular process. And that's how everything else, none of the other buildings out there in SIP have come before the Planning Commission because they haven't needed to. They've all been permitted uses by right, and the design review done, for the most part, within the business park is done internally with the business park ownership. That isn't even something that comes to staff, except for a limited area in the residential part of SIP. So I think the commission should be cognizant of, when you make the land use, change, the land uses that are become permitted in that land use are now what we would have to live with.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Vice Chair Liebig, any comments?
It's tough. It's a tough one. I'm leaning to supporting staff's recommendation, but that's not going to get us there. I don't like the idea of piecemealing, and I certainly don't want to be having a jumbled set of permitted uses from one parcel to another. I would be willing to consider it if there were a project, but that said, warehousing was a concern, so I'm not sure I would be okay with that, so.
Commissioner Sternfeld.
Yeah, so this is tricky, because the design that Ms. Acevedo showed us tonight, the lot that we're actually talking about was like 60% parking and trees and setback. It was like a third of one building that was actually manufacturing, which is a very beautiful picture to paint in my mind, and something, I think, why the commission is struggling with saying, oh, well, maybe we could be okay with this if all the lots are combined and everything works out perfect and it's developed this exact way. But making a change to allow those uses on this parcel, especially given the statements I previously made, I believe this is a gateway to this community. I believe that it needs to have downgraded uses from the uses around it to transition into that community. And while something like we saw could work, I think, it doesn't really do it for me. Candidly. So my preference would be that there's no warehousing. And because of that and the discrepancy between what staff and the applicant want, I don't want to support the item either. I'd either rather continue it and let staff continue to work with the applicant to figure this out, or just say no tonight. The entranceway to the community is important to me, and this is an area where, with really good intentions, we not as us particularly, but we, the city, has missed the mark sometimes because we didn't think about what would actually happen when something gets built versus what we see, or what may be the best case scenario.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure the commission was clear that the exhibit that Ms. Acevedo, showed, those were fairly what they build, which are primarily, warehouse distribution kind of buildings. And so they had the truck docks and they were faced internally. That's a very common, layout. But that's, certainly a possibility of what could go there should the land use change be approved, without zeroing out, any of some of those uses. So this still seems to like to come back to the fundamentals of, is there any scenario where, warehouse distribution, could be palatable to the commission on this particular property?
And for me, that answer is no.
Thanks, Commissioner Sternfels. Commissioner Sablan?
So I'm open to continuing it if staff thinks they could work with the applicant to find some uses, add these uses back and add conditions. But it does sound like most of the commissioners want to see an actual project, and I also understand that too.
Commissioner Berliner?
I don't have any other comments.
All right. So we are going around and around now, and I think we need to make a decision.
Chairman, if I may?
Yes, absolutely.
So the project applicant approached me on the sidebar, and they would like to request continuance because they do want to try, they've been listening to your comments, and they do want to try to work through them with staff and come back to you.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Ms. Hamilton, I'm sorry, did they express a date certain in which they would need for that? Because if we're going to offer continuance, I do believe we need to suggest a date.
The next meeting of the Planning Commission, May 2nd, is canceled due to the
Correct.
State of the City event that will be held in the Galleria. So the next available Planning Commission date is May 16th. So it sounds like May 16th might work, so I would continue it if that's your desire to that date.
Well, can I just ask for one piece of clarification? So I feel like we're just kicking the ball back to city staff now. Like, so the city staff had a recommendation, the applicant didn't support it. I don't think the commission supports either at this point. And so we're going to kick it back in a continuance and just kind of say, keep working at it?
Well, no, I think, if I may, the applicant did bring forth some suggested items, including potentially adding conditions on the adjacent property, treating that property as a whole, kind of master planning it. And also, through your discussion tonight, I think you've provided city staff with more clarity on what you meant by transitional uses or potential conditions. So I think we have a little bit more to work with this time around, and I'm confident that we might be able to bring something back that hopefully we can all agree upon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. With that, is there any support for continuing the item?
Can I throw out one more thing to
Go ahead,
consider?
Vice Chair Liebig.
Hours of operation. If we are including loading docks, maybe consider hours of operation. I know we've considered it on other projects. I don't want to say what it is because I would really like the applicant to be able to work with staff and come up with something. But if we're operating loading docks 24/7 adjacent to a residential, that could be a problem.
All right, we'll take that into consideration.
Commissioner Sablan?
So the applicant did reference some studies on acoustics. I don't know if staff has seen those. So if staff can get eyes on that and see if what they've represented is accurate.
Yes, we have seen those in the context of another project that they worked on.
Thank you. So is there support among the commission to continue the item, or is there a motion that someone would like to make?
I'll move we continue this item to the May 16th Planning Commission meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. With that, general administration functions, part 2. Informational discussion. Any comments from commissioners or staff that they'd like to share?
Yeah, just real quick reminder, as Director Hamilton stated, we did cancel our next coming meeting, May 2nd, so that any commissioners may attend the State of the City. So our next meeting will be May 16th. We will be having a closed session at that particular meeting, so we would ask if commissioners can come here at 5:30. If that's not workable for a majority of the commission, we can look at other options, but we will have closed session next time. And so I wanted to inform the commission of that since it's not common at Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Tilly.
Sorry, David, what date was the closed session?
May 16th. It would immediately precede our regular meeting.
Gotcha. I'm okay with that.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yes. I'm going to hit this every single meeting. May 18th is the Planning Commissioner Training Workshop. It's right across the street. I'm actually looking for at least one additional volunteer to help set up and possibly take down. And so that would be about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. So you don't have to tell me now, I'm not under pressure, but if anybody is coming to that, wouldn't mind coming a little bit early, I would like some help setting up.
Awesome. We would take that into consideration. Any other comments? All right, with that, the meeting is adjourned.